hopefully you didn't feel like you had to wait too long. We're going to now go to my colleague from Florida, Mr. Mills, for 5 minutes.
Thank you so much. Thanks for your time. I appreciate you guys being here. I appreciate the chairman for putting this together. I wanted to go through a couple of just very easy questions for you. You know, Republicans are putting human rights defenders' lives at risk, is what we're being told. And I just want to talk about what a kind of hyperbolic statement that is when these things are made by our colleagues, but also others. Certain offices at the state, like DRL, use this argument and intentionally overclassify information as a way to shield their program from congressional scrutiny and accountability. Can you tell me whether or not you feel that's true, that we are in some way putting human rights lives at risk?
I think there was a conversation about whether we should be, the State Department should be putting on a website or being much more public about all of the grants that go out to help human rights defenders in dictatorship. Right? And I said if we did, in some cases, if we did that, it would be putting their lives at risk. I wasn't accusing anyone of doing that now because we're not doing that now.
But I mean, Congress is more than capable of being able to understand certain classified sensitivities.
Correct.
But at the same time, in an effort to try, and this is the oversight and accountability piece, we're supposed to show transparency and accountability for the American people and also for the taxpayers and how things are being done. My chairman here has even in the past shown where on a new department or bureau that had been established, it wouldn't even say who works for those independent. Is that not correct, that we tried to source this multiple times? How is that in some way not showing transparency, accountability, or in some ways putting someone at risk of a classification when you don't even show who's actually part of that actual independent department or bureau?
I think we may be talking, you mean a bureau of the U.S. government?
Yes, I mean, I'll
okay, well, that's a totally different issue we have not discussed in this hearing.
It was the climate czar, Mr. Kerry, that would not identify the individuals being paid by the taxpayers who are working in his office.
That's and so,
totally different issue from grants
but do you
made
think
to
that
human rights
those
defenders.
do you think those types of things, though, should be held or classified, or do you think they should be transparent to the American people?
I think those things should be transparent to Congress.
I would absolutely agree.
There are situations where, again, we're talking about human rights defenders in Cuba or Lebanon or Iraq or China. Like, we do have to be careful whether something is formally classified or not. I'm sure you would agree, not to endanger people who share our values, who take the risk of being partners with the U.S. government.
But I think you would also agree that making sure that we find out where these grant fundings are allocated. So let's just say as an example, and I'm sure that it's already been beaten a few times on this, but what about the money that's being allocated to UNRWA? What about the $343 million that went to them last year, where you had members of UNRWA who was participating in the October 7th incident? Or the fact that they've said almost 10% of the 13,000 employees actually celebrated the attack on October 7th. I mean, Mr. Richardson, in your opinion, do you think that an organization who participates in such things should continue to receive government funding?
No, of course not. I think the larger issue is also that we don't require any vetting of U.S. dollars to go into the UN system. So while we know what happened with UNRWA because of reporting, we don't actually do our own independent analysis and security checks of humans that are actually receiving funding, and so we need to change that, especially with the UN system.
And this is exactly what the OIG and SOPCO talked about with SIGAR with regards to the independent grants and how they're being weaponized and being abused. You watched where companies like Comonix International and DAE and Creative Associates and all these supposed implementing partners who continue to say that they're doing things to get advocacy, we're actually just telling people, hey, we have to get grants out as fast as possible because if we don't spend the money, we're not going to be able to receive our second tranche. That is not what I consider to be physically responsible, and especially if you go back to the November 2011 IG report from SIGAR on the Comonix Afghan Stabilization Initiative program in southern Afghanistan, where money was being allocated and in some cases falling into the hands of Taliban and also those who are running the poppy and opium fields. So my point is in all this, and I know this is the point of the chairman as well, we need to have better oversight, accountability to make sure that this money is not falling into the hands of the very people that we say that we're trying to combat against. And I think that the only way we're going to do that is to have more transparency from departments like the DRL. With that, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Mills. We're going to go to another round of questioning here. I'm going to recognize myself